back, everybody. Thank you for joining us yet again. I am so excited to introduce Tracy Helton. Tracy, for those of you who do not know, for some reason my Siri keeps popping in here. Siri, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the world. Tracy is not only a person who is a harm reduction advocate. You can see Tracy use social media to destigmatize drug use and harm reduction, as well as, Tracy has been getting Narcan, syringes, test strips, safer use information into community, making community connection using the internets and the interwebs for as long as I can remember, and is a strong voice for humanizing harm reduction, for keeping harm reduction inside of communities who care and respond to the people that they love who are nearby. And without further ado, I am going to let Tracy take it away. So just to help with the process, if you have questions for Tracy, put them in the chat, and then we will actually open the floor for questions for sort of a Q&A after Tracy has been speaking. And that's where we're going to go. Tracy, are you ready?
Yeah. Yes. So hi, good morning or good afternoon. I guess it depends on where you're at. I'm actually excited to be here. I always feel weird, like on these Zoom calls, like I'm looking at myself trying to adjust my hair and stuff like that. But I use a lot of technology. So I'll just talk a little bit about how I came to this place where I do harm reduction work through tech. So I was using drugs very heavily for around 10 years, from 1988 until 1998. And I was featured in this movie called Black Tar Heroin, The Dark End of the Street. And then I had got into recovery in 1998. But in 1999, the movie that had been filmed when I was using drugs very chaotically, came out. And I had a decision to make, which was, I had signed away my rights. This movie was going to come out whether I wanted it to or not. It portrayed me, in very sort of exploitive ways. But I had decided that I would try to use whatever platform that I could to try to help other people. And what I mean by that was that around the same time in San Francisco, they had at the time what they had considered to be an overdose crisis, which, looking back on it, it just mind-boggling to me, because it was less than 200 people, but of those 200 people was a lot of people that I knew, including my girlfriend that had died of an accidental overdose. And I got involved in overdose prevention, and I really wanted to do whatever I could to try to use what little notoriety I had to help teach overdose prevention, to help people if they wanted to get into treatment, whatever it was, educate people, but also humanize the face of people who are using drugs. Because, having lived through, when there was no antiretrovirals for HIV, and having people throw bleach on me, like, all these different things, people throwing rocks at me, like being unhoused, and like all the negative things I had been through. And we shouldn't have to humanize. People should instantly have that kind of empathy for other humans, but unfortunately that's not the case. So in 1999, I went to Seattle, where a lot of us heard about naloxone for the first time, because they were talking about overdose prevention, and Dan Big was there. And I just remember he stood up and he had talked about how we, because we started out by teaching rescue breathing to people, and sort of doing overdose education, and he was saying, well, we really should be putting naloxone into the hands of people who are using drugs. And that was just such a radical idea at the time. It almost blew the top off of my head, because I was like, of course, that makes perfect sense, that's something that we should be doing. But it seemed like so far, it seemed so far away, so distant, and so impossible because of, the things, the systems that hate people that use drugs, and all the barriers in the criminal justice system and all that other type of stuff that goes into it. So in 2003, San Francisco became the first city-sponsored naloxone program in the country. Not that people were not giving away naloxone before then. It just became the first city-sponsored one. And so I got very heavily involved, with harm reduction and drug overdose education and prevention. But as a lot of us do, by around 2006, 2007, I became very, very burnt out. Having seen so many of my friends die from AIDS and then die from overdoses, it just had burned me out to the point that I decided I was going to take a break for a few years, because, I was having children and stuff like that. And if you get nothing else from my talk, the emotional toll of working with our friends and working this field, you have to find ways to take care of yourself, whatever it can be anything. And now I think I found a little bit of balance, but it's just so hard. So time went on, and my children started to get a little bit older, and I said, well, I'd like to find some way to try to contribute, but I'm not really sure, because of my availability. And I think a lot of people, with me having a mental health disability too, a lot of people are not sure their ability to get involved, but technology really helps with that, because I didn't physically have to go out. The world sort of came in through the internet. And so when they had put the movie that I was in on YouTube, I started answering people's questions on YouTube and started interacting with people. I started writing. And then in 2013, what was happening is people were talking about how their friend had died of an overdose, and this had happened. And I started thinking to myself, and as early as 2012, I was like, well, why don't I just send them naloxone? Like, it just makes perfect sense. I should just send it to them. Especially, some communities are super well funded and have all these excess resources. Maybe I should just repurpose those for other places that are not as well resourced. And so I slowly started, meeting people and sending naloxone to people through the mail, which at the time was completely illegal. And I was, I initially was wondering if they were going to come arrest me, especially so in 2013, someone had asked me if I would be a moderator for a subreddit called Our Opiates. It's on Reddit, that's focused around, people who use opioids. And then I just decided, what, fuck it, I'm just going to go big, and I'm just going to put out there that I'm willing to send people, to my ability to send people naloxone, and also do drug education. Because what I found with the internet is that there is so much drug education. It's so impossible now to find accurate information unless you know exactly where you're going to. And that is a huge problem, because, you have people who are just embarking, and now in the age of fentanyl, it's so dangerous. But even back then in 2013, 2014, people were ordering, fentanyl analogs off the dark. So you could see you could see it coming before it actually, the wave sort of hit the United States. But, more and more people were saying, oh, can you help me, or can you link me? And so a lot of what I do is actually just like chit chatting with people and telling them that their experience is valid, and they're not bad people because they use drugs, even though they shouldn't feel that way. No one should feel that way, but society makes you feel that way, like there's something wrong with you. And just getting to know people, and then also trying to tap them into mutual aid communities. So then I started that project of doing like drug education, bringing in drug, educators. And then another piece of that started where we decided, a couple of us decided, people are going on these chat rooms with video. Video conferencing was still fairly new from person to person, not for businesses, but So we had said, well, maybe we could do something where we're observing people and we get their information. And if something happens, we could, potentially call the paramedics or call someone to come to help them, because these people we've never met, we don't even know a lot of times you don't even know their real name. But there was nothing else like that out there, because a lot of times what we found was the people who were using technology were also the people who are socially isolated, who maybe the person they're getting this stuff from, or like they had like maybe one or two other friends, but a lot of the people were using and they were very isolated. So that was that was something that we were doing. And even I was doing it, and then we were asking a couple other people, would you be willing to do that? And we were just like trying everything that was we could think of. And people actually a few different times called my personal phone when someone was having an overdose, and would you try to talk us through that, because there was just such limited information out there that I said, okay, this is something that I was willing to do. And so a lot of those sort of ideas, you had Now There's Never Use Alone, and now Next Distro, which is a hub for overdose information in the United States, sort of came out of, Jamie says that came out of, talking to me, where I was just like, it just makes perfect sense for us to be using using technology to link people. And, now it's gone way farther than me. My system is like, rudimentary. I take screenshots of information people send me and delete it, versus, being on Signal or having these encrypted, forms and stuff like that. Like, I was just wanting to get involved and just like do what was ever, do whatever was necessary, um, just to try to link people. And like a lot of people from that interaction then have gone on to start their own programs, because they said, well, if that person can do it, then why can't we do it? And I think that's a lot of and also the social disobedience of it, because I'm an old punk sort of, why can't why, just because it's illegal, like why can't we do it? It didn't make any sense to me. And so, and then also just the mutual aid part of it is like, we're not waiting for the government to come to help us. It's like we're finding ways to help each other, which was something I was like super invested in. And then sort of like the next steps that I've taken with that is, being on social media and like answering people's questions, and also like moderating forums for information, and then, making TikToks, which is sort of like the thing I've been doing in the last year. We're trying to use humor and also linking people, but then also making Narcan available through various social channels. Like at one point I had a Snapchat, I was giving out Narcan. I was giving out Narcan on Twitter. I was giving out Narcan on Facebook. I was giving out Narcan on Instagram. I was giving out Narcan, all these different, on Reddit, like all these different social media channels, to try to get the message out to anyone. Because, and then eventually I did some national interviews where I was willing to talk about this project that I was doing that, was still, pretty illegal in most parts of the country. And it was interesting to see the shift, really, that started happening around 2018, where, before, when I would do these social media interviews, all the comments would be like, those people should die. It's horrible stuff where, they tell you when you do interviews, don't read the comments. But there was a shift in 2018 where it became people that were trying to find Narcan, and, naloxone. It became that. And I saw in real time, like, people's eyes started sort of open, where they were like, oh yes, this does impact me. And we tried other things. Like, another thing that we had done was, we would send multi-use vials to people who were selling drugs, and middlemen, people who were, would have these houses where people were, lots of people were coming in and out. And this was innovative at the time, providing large amounts of naloxone to places where people were, sort of like consumption rooms, but in somebody's house, and people were coming in and out. And there was one person in particular, he saved like 40 people just by himself. And at one point I was giving some vendors in the dark net some naloxone, and they were sending it out to customers, like just because we were just trying to get it out there to people that we knew, anyone that I knew who was definitely going to use it. That's who I was trying to get to, and really sort of like make it accessible. But I had to use the technology, and a lot of times, I had to have people explain to me how to do different things because I didn't know what I was doing. I'm 51 years old, and I'm still learning. But I think especially for people who are socially isolated, for people who live in rural communities where, like people were telling me, I've sent Narcan to naloxone. I've sent it to different countries where they had no access a few different times. But, I remember one person in particular who lived in Canada who said, I could go to the pharmacy potentially to get it, but I'm so far from there. And if I have to call for emergency services, it's going to take at least 50 minutes. I'm going to be long dead before anybody's going to get here. Like, I actually have to have this. So my loved one can help me in this, if I need it. So that really, really struck me as like the immediate need that it hadn't really clicked, that in a rural community, like even, access to the internet and having phones. And like a lot of times what we also found was like unhoused people had phones, and that was their source of information for like finding out about bad batches. Now everything's contaminated with fentanyl, but back then, when there would be like a bad batch alert, like how do we get that information out there to people? And for a lot of unhoused people, they would put in information and they would also get back information. So it was it was a lot of like new learnings and information exchange that absolutely would not have happened without technology, because more and more what I'm finding and what I had found at that time was that the traditional syringe exchange model, where people come in, when I was using drugs, that was like how you found everything out, was you would come in and you would run into people and you would find different things out. But a lot of people don't even access those services here in the United States. Either they don't have them, or they're in the cities. And as the profile of like, the drugs have expanded out, they don't, you can order syringes off Amazon, or maybe you can't. People are fabricating syringes through Tractor Supply. Like they don't come in contact with the only person they come in contact with is the person that they're getting it from. And so they deserve, access to harm reduction information as well. But we had to facilitate a way for that to happen. And then, and we would, I don't know why I keep saying we, it was me. It was me doing this, but like there's other people who helped me along the way. But a lot of it was like me sitting in my house trying to figure out creative ways to do things. Another thing I've done was, seed secondary exchanges, where I would, send someone 100 syringes, and, say if you're selling a couple and now you have enough money to get some off of Amazon, to seed in exchange, where you all are figuring this out, like just trying to find creative problem solving, where even like programs, I would link people to different people in areas that they had no idea that these people were operating in these areas, because people, like I said, people are so isolated. So you'd find two people doing mutual aid projects in the same state, or like someone who wanted to replicate something similar in two southern states. So I hooked these two people together. It was a harm reduction project and a hepatitis C project, and I wouldn't have heard of either one of them if it wouldn't have been through social media. So I just try to make myself available through various channels so people can get a hold of me. I'm actually going to run out of battery. I'm going to have to go put this on the charger in a second and unplug my headphones because I don't have both. But like I said, I'm not necessarily the best person with technology, but I think, um, the desire was really there. And I think it worked, it worked. Like there was a period of my life I was having like really bad panic attacks and I had trouble like leaving my house, but I still could do this project. Like I still could contribute in some way. And also I think linking people who stewarding them along the process of like learning how to start their program or link them to other people, um, where they would never ever come in contact with those people in their entire life. And even today, it's weird because not necessarily weird, but like I'll go places when I go to conferences or I'll go places with my kids sometimes and people will stop me and they'll be like, you don't remember, but you sent me naloxone and I was 17 years old and I would have never been able to get it. And that naloxone saved my life. Or, I was walking down the street and someone was screaming at me, you're a lifesaver and stuff like that. It's like, but I don't see myself like that. Like, I just see myself as another person who wished that would have been available for me. Like, wished that there would have been some other way for me to get help besides for the police getting involved, or like, having to get a $700 ambulance bill. And people want to contribute. They want to help their fellows who are using drugs, but a lot of times they don't know how. And like the amount of disinformation that I've seen in the years, like people who are thinking that they're giving hepatitis C to themselves, people who think that you can put ice on someone's balls to reverse an overdose, like people who don't understand what's in drug, like, and the amount of information around buprenorphine and methadone, that's like a whole nother set of things, like the stigma around these medications. And the last sort of work that I've been doing is around destigmatizing medications, because the people who speak the loudest about those medications absolutely don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Not 9 times out of 10, like, and people die around that. People die because someone is spreading their opinions as facts, and it's really really bad here in the United States, where 12-step is the dominant ideology for people in recovery, and so they say things to people who are practicing harm reduction that are very inaccurate and painful, and people follow those recommendations and they die. So I've been very vocal in trying to, because I've been on methadone twice and I worked at a free methadone clinic, um, really destigmatize these medications, to where people say, fuck what everybody else thinks. And that's really what it is. That's, in some ways, that's really kind of what it's all about. And I have to say, like, when I started doing this kind of work, is very socially isolating. But now it's like when I go out places, a lot of times people you would never think of, want to talk to me about the work that I do, because so many people are impacted by overdose, particularly opioid overdose. In the United States, we lost 1 million people since I started doing this work. A million fucking people. So the work never ends. The work never ends. But I'm happy that I have been able to carve out some kind of niche, and then that work has been able to expand, and people have built on it, and they do their whole. I mean, I'm always like super excited when I see like people doing like mutual aid projects and in different places, and like linking people up, and building something. This whole network is particularly of underground harm reduction projects, and then also to see people becoming the harm reduction educator on these online communities and saying, no, what you're saying is not, it's not correct, and like these are the different things you should know about. Because before there was like Tripsid and Blue Light, there was another one, but unless you went into those particular forums, now Google, I don't know about in Canada, but when you optimize, it's optimized in such a way that a lot of the searches, when you ask questions about particular drugs, go straight to rehabs. So the information that you're getting is not, it's not even correct. Like if you're searching, trying to find information, you're not even getting correct information. So I wanted to really try to take questions If that's okay. Is that okay? I don't know how this app works. I'm just learning.
I'm here to help.
Here she comes.
Thanks, Tracy. So far the comments have been, there's some people, one person in particular who said that your naloxone saved their life in 2017 and that they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. And which is amazing. So we'll just give you a minute to get yourself sorted. In the meantime, if you have any questions for Tracy regarding anything that we talked about, but also if you know any of her work and the amount of naloxone that she has managed to get distributed into communities who don't have resources. So, that she keeps mentioning mutual aid, which essentially is a redistribution of resources through community means, because we all know that community-based response is the future and is how we keep each other safe, because we care about our community members at large. It's important to us. So we don't care about the outcomes of because we need to adhere to a grant or something like that. What we're really doing and what Tracy is doing is a radical redistribution of harm reduction resources through her networks in the U.S., which is really great. Tracy,
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so think about how powerful that is. That I don't know that person, but I still was able to help them in some way, and that's how technology has really shifted that landscape. I mean, I used to distribute naloxone in person, and people would come back and you'd get to know them, but now it's like a few, just chatting with people I don't even know, and most of them can be anonymous, and I think that's powerful in itself, because a lot of people don't want to disclose their issues because of the stigma that they're facing, and so technology allows them to be anonymous. I mean, you'd be surprised. There's one person in particular that I got to know, and no one in his life knew that he was using, and there was just so much stigma attached to it, and he would get, and I was sitting there thinking, like, how are you even going to if you overdose, like what will even happen? But I guess he found like one person that he would deal with and interact with, but and that's the experience of a lot of people here I mean, I can't speak to Canada, but like here in the United States, it's a huge country. There's a lot of people in pockets that are using alone, or like one or two people, and like their access to harm reduction is so limited. But fentanyl is cheaper than a mixed drink where I live. I mean, I don't know about anywhere else, but like it's everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about like when COVID hit, how did that change what you did? Did you use a lot more technological resources to be distributing your information, and were you forced to suddenly participate in the internet's version of harm reduction?
So when COVID hit, so most of the work that I do has been taken over by the National Next organization. I try to hit people that act like that. I hit a different set of people who wouldn't necessarily be tapped into Next. A lot of times it's like family members who, first of all, I'm trying to change a lot of the attitudes for the family members around like putting their relatives out who are using their children. And a lot of the families now are starting to practice harm reduction, where they they allow their children to use. The parents have Narcan on hand, but also, participating in online spaces where I talk about harm reduction. So really trying to get into a different set of people, diversifying who I'm talking to. But then I started TikTok, where I which is kind of like a strange environment to do harm reduction, especially because they ban a lot of harm reduction content. A lot of social media platforms don't like people to talk about drugs, I guess because of liability issues or stigma. I'm not really sure what, but during the pandemic, I started switching up how I was messaging harm reduction. So a lot of times when I do like Narcan videos and stuff like that, it's not me talking about people using drugs. It's like me presenting Narcan in a way that's sort of not, you know, just innocuous, like here I am with my box of Narcan dancing around, because when you start actually talking about the mechanism of using opioids, then a lot of the social media outlets don't want it. But if you are a person who's using drugs, you absolutely want that little box. You absolutely want what's there, so you'll contact me. And so I have open DMs and you know, and reach out to people. I also go on other people's you know, content creators and start talking about Narcan in the comments and stuff like that. I think it just really depends. And also doing work around you know, I hate when people take, you know, a lot of it is advocacy work just in general. You know, trying to change narratives. I mean, my big thing with overdose prevention is there's way too much money going to governments and not enough going to sort of mutual aid and smaller projects. So I'm doing work on that on the inside too, and trying to create, you know, new first line responders for, you know, people who are carrying Narcan. So, you know, we did a graffiti art show in 2018 where, you know, it wasn't a natural match to try to do this particular event because, you know, it was a lot of younger people saying, well, I don't use opioids, so I don't really need this. And then we were having discussions about your drugs being, you know, potentially cross-contaminated with fentanyl. And, but it ended up where a lot of the people who said that they didn't think they needed it ended up being the people who used it and contacted me later over the years and saying, you know, we ended up using that. So you even doing like art, putting together, you know, art and putting it on social media, like anything to get people thinking that I might need this and what are the reasons that I might potentially need it. It always seems like it's the person who says, I don't think I'm going to need this and ends up needing it, like for whatever reason.
That is the heartbreak of the, you know, like, it's not if someone overdoses anymore, it's a matter of when. So anyone who is using illicit substances across the board. And to be fair, I mean, people have overdosed from safe, you know, what is deemed safe supply, and when we had a, you know, less toxic drug supply as well. So it's not like that is new, but harm reduction as it becomes, you know, or is ritual. So if people are willing to go get the syringes and alcohol wipes, and also pick up a Narcan kit and put a, like, you know, a preparedness plan into their ritual. So what happens when an overdose occurs? What's the plan? So who needs to know that I'm using, how might I be able to get help to me as soon as possible in whatever mechanism that comes up. And I see you trying and advocating for that to be put into the ritual of drug use, as well as into the ritual of family matrix, like how we take care of each other. Just making sure you have Narcan on hand. And
so I think of all the things I've ever done, the one that has struck me the most was last year. I got a message from a 12-year-old on Instagram that told me that I had sent them Narcan and they had used it on their father. And then I thought to myself, at first I was like, you know, how terrible this is that this 12-year-old had to use that, because that's just like my instant reaction. But then I was like, but how terrible would it have been if they wouldn't have had a father? And so it's horrific that we've come to this place that our drug supply is this contaminated, that these are things that we have to think about, but these are also things that people need to think about, and like having that available for that person, and like, you know, then doing some, you know, like talking to them about like how are they feeling, and like, is there something I can try to do to support them? but the dog's very interested. But then there's a lot of stuff that you know, I couldn't articulate because I have my own, you know, I have my own children. Like I've tried to, my own children probably know more about Narcan than a lot of people that I know. Like I'm trying to make the next generation of advocates. You know, they can pack up the supplies and they can help me. And they've helped film some of my TikToks because it's like, I want them to be more educated than I feel like I was. Not that I, you know, because when I jumped into drug use, it was all gas and no brakes. I didn't necessarily understand the implications of a lot of things that could happen. Like, it's not that I probably would have changed that experience, but I probably would have taken better care of my body and myself if I would have known I would live this long. You know what I mean?
I do. I was wondering if you've seen a decrease in the stigma and social policy around the criminalization of drug users. Is there like any hope for us?
I think there is some. I mean, obviously they've passed the you know, the decriminalization in Oregon, and there's been, you know, I think. But there's sort of a backlash in San Francisco in particular. There's an anti-harm reduction backlash where they're saying, well, we really should get the police involved, and the police should be the precipitators of getting people into recovery because that's harm reduction. And we're like, what the fuck are you even what are you even talking about? Like, why? They said, well, the harm reductionists have had their chance to help, and now we should be moving in and we should be having criminalization. But I think on the whole, when I talk to people, I mean, there's definitely a lot more empathy than there used to be. But it's sad that someone has to die in your immediate circle for you to have that kind of empathy, where before there was a lot of it lacking. But still I get the, you know, comments and stuff like that from people. But I think in the legal side, people are starting to, but it's unfortunate because it's built in a lot of ways, it's built around systemic racism, where when it became white people that were dying, suddenly you have all this empathy. But it was when Black people and brown people have problems with other drugs, then you're locking them up. Like even the way that we've, you know, implemented, you know, marijuana policy, cannabis policy in the United States, and how there's still people in prison for cannabis, but then you have, you know, your high-end dispensaries and stuff like that. So it's definitely still a two-tiered system of the haves and the have-nots when it comes to drug use, because, you know, like your past speaker was saying, like everybody uses drugs in some ways. Whether it's always weird in the recovery from drug community, because it's always the people who like juice steroids, chain vape, and then you know, have other kind of sort of, you know, caffeine drinking Monster energy drinks back to back, who want to talk about somebody being on Suboxone. It's like, do you not see the hypocrisy in that? But they absolutely don't. It's like, this person is on drugs. It's like, but you're on fucking drugs. There's one person in particular who, they asked me for hormone needles, but they want to get in the comments of some of my videos and talk about people. And I don't want to break their anonymity, because it's like, I want them to be able to be using clean needles for their steroids. But it's like, dude, I wish you would just shut the fuck up. You know, sometimes I just delete people's comments. Like, you don't need my empathy. Like, goodbye. You don't need any of that. But there's been a lot of change for sure. But there's a lot of room to go. And it also depends on sort of where you live, and the resources that you have available.
100%. Amazing. So we're gonna wrap up this section. Is there any comments, anything that you want to articulate or convey to Tracy before she hangs up the phone? Are there even people out there? It's so random. It feels, you know, yes, we're connecting, but it definitely feels like we're working in isolation. So
yes. Well, bye, friends. Bye.
All right, Tracy, thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you for coming today and sitting with us and sharing your story and frustrations, and also all of the amazing work that you do. Oh, we got lots of people saying thank you, thank you. Tracy is awesome. Thank you for being so candid. Carrie is like, we are out here, we are listening. So even though we can't tell in the stage room, we are. And yeah, if anyone wants to support the work that Tracy does, to amplify it, to boost it, you can connect with Tracy apparently on TikTok, which I didn't know, but I don't. Instagram, Facebook. Tracy's really active, and pretty much an open book, and also has helped people like myself understand how I might be able to help distribute in other ways Narcan into community. So it's been a really great knowledge exchange person for me, as well as I always love being able to sit and have a moment with Tracy, because just a totally fucking awesome human being. So that being said, all right, thank you so much. Okay. So I think that we're at the point in the symposium where we might have a dance party. Let me just make sure that that is still going to be happening. So it is, it's dance party time. But before we go, I wanted to just take a moment. So often am I sitting in groups of people where we take a moment of silence for all those who we have lost and are grieving. And I wanted to encourage you to go get a pillow or a blanket or a coat, because the moment of silence feels incredibly difficult, because we have been silenced. This is a time of being silenced in so many different ways. And I thought maybe we could have a moment of rage instead. So I'm going to go get my jacket so that I don't terrify the office. And if you wish to join me in a bit of a scream release for the frustrations, for the people that we have lost, for this impossible system that we are working in, for all of the atrocities that our folks are feeling, for the structural violences, for all the grief, and for all the loss. Get ready to join me in a moment of rage. Hopefully this will muffle. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that felt really good. I'm gonna do it one more time. Thanks for joining me in the moment of rage. It's now time for the dance party. It's a good opportunity for you to take a moment, hydrate, caffeinate, go outside, put your feet on the ground, go say hi to someone, text.